Hello and welcome. Today we'll be starting the Rails template tutorial. This tutorial will walk you through getting a Rails template created so that you can use it as a launch point for other Rails applications you may have in the future. This part will be going over getting the application set up, creating and initializing the database, and finally creating a migration file to then start creating tables in that database. As always with projects, a link to its GitHub will be in the description, along with timestamps for parts throughout the video. With that said, let's get started. First, to create the application itself, you will need a Docker file, which I will name dockerfile.dev since it will be the development Docker file, a docker compose.yaml file, and a gem file. I will be working throughout this tutorial inside my WSL Ubuntu distribution, so if you would like to follow along exactly, you can look to a previous video that I have made to see how to set that up. I will fill out the Docker file and the Docker Compose YAML file up with what should be there. If you want, you can pause the screen to fill in what you need, or you can go to the GitHub and download these files. This is what is required to create a Docker container that can run the Rails application, and will also create the postgres container to run alongside the Rails application. We will be using bundler for Rails, so we will need to pre-fill the gem file for what bundle we'll need to create the initial Rails application. It will then override this file later, but this way Rails will be installed using bundler, which will ensure that it is compatible with the other gems that we will be using. Once you have those files, we need to build the containers, so run sudo docker compose up -- build. This will build the containers within a docker compose YAML file. Then it will try to run them, but it will fail since nothing is set up yet. The next we want to run is sudo docker compose run app /bin /sh. We are using app since that is what we name the service in the docker compose file. This will start the containers and give you access to the Rails container. In this container, we want to run bundle install. Bundle install will install everything in the gem file, which in this case is everything for Rails. When it installs, it may say that some files will be overwritten. Examples could be a readme file, a .getignore file, and a gem file. We want to say yes to all of these. This will take a minute, so I will be back when it is done. Okay, next we want to run bundle exec rails -- version. Bundle exec tells bundler we want to execute something for one of our gems, and rails -- version asks Rails to print out the version number. If you see version 2.6.6 or something similar printed, then the installation was a success. Next we want to run bundle exec rails new -- database equals postgres ql -- API and then a period. The database option tells Rails we want to use Postgres as our database, and the -- API says we are making this application an API, which means it will not make all the extra unrequired setup for a normal application. The period says to use the current directory to place the new Rails application in instead of creating a new directory. This will also take some time to prepare. Okay, next we want to make sure everything is set up for the database within the Rails application. To do this, go to the config folder and then the database.yaml file. In that file, there is a section for the default database. We want to add the following lines of code to this section. Host tells Rails where to find the database for the development, testing, and staging. Username is the default Postgres user, and password is the given password in the docker compose YAML file. With these lines, Rails can now communicate with the Postgres database. You can also change the names of your development and test databases in this file as well if you choose. I will change the names to template_development and template_test. You must make sure that the test database has the different name than development and production, as it will be erased and rewritten to multiple times during testing. Next, we want to now create the database and set the initial schema. Go back to the containers console and type out the following code. Bundle exec rake db : create. Again, bundle exec is telling bundler that we're about to execute something in one of our gems, in which case this will be rake. And then we're telling rake for the db option we want to create it. You may need to exit and re-enter the container to do this if it fails. Now that the database are created, we want to run bundle exec rails g or generate. In this case, g is shorthand for generate, active_record :migration, and then I'm giving my migration file the name initial. This tells Rails to create a migration with the name initial. You will notice that migrations start with the date time, then the name given. This is so when you run the migration function later, it will know what you have already run and have not. It will then run our migrations you have not run yet in chronological order. I will have some example pieces of code in the initial migration file on GitHub in case anybody would like to see how you could add to this file. What we really need to add are the following lines. These lines tell the schema how we want to communicate with the database. Finally, run bundle exec rake db:schema::load. This will load the schema into the database for later use. You only want to run this line on the first run of the application or when you drop and need to re-add to the database. If you fill out a migration and want to add that to the schema and subsequently the database, you would run bundle exec rails db::migrate. This will migrate the migrations that you've made into the schema and then migrate the schema into the database. With all that done, you now have a Rails API created with a development and test database created. Next, we will look into the gems that we will be using, what those gems can do, and Sidekick for background jobs and job scheduling. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next tutorial.